Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the next panel session, and I think we have 4 excellent, distinguished speakers on the topic. Thank you for the organizers for having us, and I think this will be one of the key areas of discussions, I think not only on stage, but also in the corridors. So what has changed in the past year since the MiCA's it's been fully applied? It's actually funny when Tommaso mentioned that I was dealing with the MiCA at its very early stages of negotiations. It feels like sort of a time traveling because, I mean, we finalized the discussions back in 2022. The world was so different than it is right now. And now we are talking about 1 year of application. It only shows that we don't have very fast decision-making processes in Europe, but I think at the same time it shows that once we take some path forward, that it actually stays with us and that we will keep going on it. So I think that that will be also one of the evidence brought by our panelists together. They were all presented, so I think without any further ado, I will start. I will kick off with one simple question to all of you. So we will be technically celebrating 1 year's anniversary of MiCA application very soon. For you personally, or for your experience, for your organization or company that you represent, what is actually the past year experience? What would you take out of it? Any specific moments? Any specific challenges? Any experience? Any moments that actually are in your mind linked to the fact that there is actually a brand new set of rules that is applied for the industry right now? I start with Vojtech.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm representing Czech National Bank, which is the supervisory authority in Czech Republic for MiCA, but also for all other sectors of financial market. And I have to say that our experience is that we have received much more MiCA applications, applications for CASP, than we expected. So far we have more than 230 applications, which is more than all other EU jurisdictions combined, which is quite interesting. There are many factors of that. Among others, relatively low administrative fees for licensing. So we are quite, I wouldn't say overloaded, but definitely we are very concentrated on this specific sector for last month. So this is very specific experience.
That is actually, that is one of the things that also attracted my attention. And I mean, even in the negotiations, we were pointing to the fact that Czech Republic is one of those countries that is very active in the area of crypto and digital assets. And it's actually interesting to see that it translated in this high number of applications. I think we'll dig deeper into this a bit later. From the industry, Philipp, from your experience, what has changed this past year?
I think the biggest change we see is actually us. I see very little hoodies, I see a lot of suits, and I think one of the goals from Europe, and that was a very good one, was professionalization of the whole area, kind of coming all together in a sense that we really want this part of a larger financial industry and we want them to work and think like them. And that's surely the biggest area of where we changed. And we are now looking way more in decisions on how is our whole structure, how is the legal framework working, so less about kind of just doing things, and that's what Europe wanted. I do want to also mention that while this and a lot of these things are very good for the consumer side, I also think that Europe has not yet unified. What I mean with that, we still have a lot of topics on convergence. We still have a lot of topics between the supervisors, actually. I mean, we have seen the reports, there's a lot of talk about that, and that I think that needs to be a learning on how to do that better, because at the end of the day, it reflects badly of us all as industry if supervisors are not united and there is problems with convergence. The other thing that I think we as Europe have failed is we have not created like the marketplace to to conquer the world, not even conquer Europe. And what I mean with that, today we approximately still have 80% of our consumers onboarded in global platforms, not those with European licenses. And this number is a testament of failure from my perspective. And this is where we need to change the way of getting rid of that. Because as long as this number is not very, very, very low, we have not implemented MiCA. We have created jobs, which is good for those people in the industry. We have created kind of new platforms that are Europeanized, but the consumers are still not there. And a level playing field will only exist if the consumers are on those platforms.
Thank you. Yeah, very good points. And I think we'll also come back to the issue of supervisory convergence and also the international dimension. Clara, from your point of view, I mean, looking a bit sort of step aside from the EU itself, what is your sort of takeaway from this past year of MiCA application?
Thank you, Ondrej, and well, it's a great pleasure being here with all of you. Yeah, Liechtenstein is not an EU member state, but we are part of the European Economic Area. And well, we were talking about 1 year of MiCA. In Liechtenstein, we were talking about 6 years already of having a comprehensive framework, which has been similar to MiCA already with the registration and supervision regime. And so for me, it's a bit like, you know, a fish that is not aware of being in the water. This is already a long way that we have been we've been dealing with that. And of course now, and we have implemented MiCA, so we have taken MiCA incorporated it in the EEA agreement, and it's applicable also in Liechtenstein, fully applicable. But it gives me the freedom now to not having to explain the whole framework, but actually to focus on the specific differentiation that we offer in Liechtenstein, which in addition to the registration and supervision of crypto asset service providers is also, and we have had that before on already, heard that about tokenization in the speech of the commissioner and also on the panel before with Peter, that the national legislation needs to step up and comprehend or complement the overarching framework that MiCA is providing for the market. And this is what we have done and what we've already introduced 6 years ago with our Blockchain Act, which is actually a civil law for tokens. So offering the legal framework and the legal basis for what a token legally is and how ownership in a token is legally transferred and how so giving also the courts and market players and everyone the legal clarity and security and enforceability of, tokenized assets being transferred peer-to-peer and within institutions. So like for the security market, for the tokenized economy, all that, to just mention one, is something that we have already implemented and that differentiates us now to the other jurisdictions that don't have such a civil law for tokens. But also we have an NFT custody for NFT custody as a service provider, as a registered registration necessary service provider activity in Liechtenstein. So also there we saw, digital asset can represent really, really valuable things. So we want institutional custodians to actually adhere to certain requirements and that there is a segregation in case of segregation obligation once the custodian defaults, for example. So in the interest of consumer protection, also in the interest of consumer protection, we introduced another role, the token lending service provider. So also when token lending is done as an activity, not just as an adjunct service like with staking under MiCA, but really as a specific role, and the differentiation is the transfer of ownership. So it's if the the token, the token lending or the custodian is the ownership is transferred to the custodian, and then the custodian is actually using the token and lends it out, for example. So because then there is no segregation in case of when the service provider defaults. So these are all the things that we have already done, and where we are a bit still ahead because we were the first ones out of the gates. But innovation in that sense is not a status, it's a process, and we have to keep looking at the framework conditions that are needed to allow for this digital economy and tokenized economy to flourish.
Yeah, thank you, and I fully agree. It's actually a process, and I think this is also the way we see it in Europe. But I think very good point, and we'll come back to it about complementarity. MiCA is not an isolated island. There's a lot of other rules and frameworks also that should fit in a game. Oliver, from your perspective, your company has recently changed the status with the MiCA license. But apart from it, what was the past year experience from your perspective?
Yeah, so thank you for having me as well. And what changed is really that it's great to be here. And it's my first, I counted it this morning, I guess, on 30 panels. And it's the first panel I'm allowed to speak officially as a licensed entity. And this is for sure the biggest change. But being active in this industry now since more than 10 years already, it's also great to see how the industry evolved itself, you know. I mean, having the commissioner here giving the keynote and the opening speech at this conference is just amazing. A couple of years ago, that would not have been possible at all. So also the industry is recognized and getting mature nowadays. I can only also support what Philipp said before. I mean, the fact that global players like KuCoin, but also we have Kraken, Coinbase, Bybit in Austria as well, adopting these great rules of MiCA and at least try to operate in this huge market on a compliant way is very important. Also to what Philipp said, to have the consumers also adopting it. You know, it really doesn't help if we follow all these rules and have these huge costs and running all these compliance procedures and policies without clients. So as long as this exists and as long as also the regulators themselves are not adopting MiCA like it was planned to have this single market also for crypto, it's really getting hard, you know. And for example, the fact that we passported all over Europe, even to Liechtenstein, but not to Malta, is a fact that should not happen at all, but it's for a reason. So we need to really focus on getting MiCA the level playing field for everybody, protecting our consumers, having no global players that do not adapt these rules and regulations in place. And then I guess the future will even be more bright than it already is. And I want to say a last thing here as well. Being licensed in Austria, it was a very, how can I say, interesting procedure to get this license, but it also needs to be said that our regulator, the FMA, but also others in Europe, really try to understand what we're doing, really try to focus to not hinder you, but give you the right guardrails to operate, and only hand out the license if you deem to be fully compliant with MiCA. And this process was very good, and I can only also say that it was a good experience getting the license in Austria.
Thank you, Oliver. I like the way you put it very diplomatically. There was an interesting experience. There must be a number of stories behind it. But I think it gives me a great occasion to come back to Vojtech as a representative of a supervisory organization. Vojtech, you mentioned the high number of licenses and the requests in the Czech Republic, which I think is a very unique position for your organization as well. But On top of that, if you look at this past year of MiCA application in terms of what are the challenges now you see from supervisory authorities, or even benefits or some shortcomings of the MiCA application that are not actually helping the supervisory authorities to do their job as for instance, that you wish. And as I said, apart from the high-low workload, but in, let's say, the issues that were mentioned in unclarities in MiCA, the issue of tokenization of other classes of assets, etc. So, do you already have any takeaways that can feed sort of the debate on what do we do in Europe in terms of regulatory work in the future?
Thank you for this question. So in the past months, we have faced some unclarities in some parts of the MiCA which had to be solved. So some of them have been already solved via ESMA Q&A tool, for example, the question of shared order book, or via Commission's interpretation. That was the question if the CASP can use the tied agents or not. So they can't. According to the interpretation of the Commission, but there are still some problems which can be solved only via legislation, and I would point out one of them which is quite interesting, and this is a lack of the common European definition of the security, of the notion of security. Because of this lack, actually, there is no clear delimitation between MiCA and MiFID. And there is already a guideline of ESMA on this, but at the same time, it is just a guideline which is non-binding, and the problem lies within the legislation itself. So, for example, to be very concrete, if you issue in Czech Republic a tokenized, I would say, security in material, in a substance security, so in Czech Republic, it will be a token according to the MiCA, because we can't have electronic securities like in, let's say, Germany or in other EU jurisdictions. But if you issue the same token in Germany, it will be already a security according to the MiFID. So you have two same instruments which are falling into the different legislative scope or regulatory scope. In Czech Republic under MiCA, in Germany under MiFID. And this is an issue we need to solve at the EU level. But the problem is that there is the part of the civil law, and the member states are very reluctant to have any harmonization in the field of civil law. So that's a problem, but I think we should, as regulators and also as governments, we should really streamline here and try to find a solution of this problem, because otherwise it's quite, to be frank, it's quite messy then.
Indeed, no, I think very, very important points, and also let's see what possible modifications we'll see in the Commission package tomorrow. But definitely, I think some more inputs and takeaways from practice would be also helpful for further work. Philipp, from the point of view of a company, and I think it was mentioned also by Clara and Oliver in their interventions, this complexity of rules, sort of that MiCA is actually not, the only piece of legislation that companies are following. We have somehow had these simultaneous action on number of new pieces of legislation in Europe, such as digital operational resilience, the transfer of funds resilience, so the AML legislation, the cyber legislation, the MiCA on top of it. Does it create actually any better understanding from the company's point of view of how these things fit all together, or does it only sort of increase the compliance burden that you would have to sort of deal with in one moment in time?
Generally, I would say the ideas of these different regulations absolutely make sense, absolutely on a high level. We have MiCA for the crypto, MiFID for the investment world, we have DORA to be resilient, and so on and so on. I think the problems are often in the details, and the problems are often when it comes to level 2 and level 3 acts. So from my perspective, that we generally have quite good level 1 text. I mean, you can always discuss certain things, and some are political, but when it comes to level 2 and level 3 text, they are often kind of going in a very, very strong speed and try to replicate, let's say, level 2 on MiCA, MiFID, even to an extent where MiCA level 1 doesn't really say that much about it. And that comes from the wish of the regulator to kind of speed up the MiCA world to decades of jurisdictional development. And that is, from my perspective, not helpful. Especially, and that comes back to, we are happy as Bitpanda, we have all free licenses, we are happy to follow these rules. But if only 20% of the consumers are consuming platforms that follow that rules, that is failing, because that means you never win any kind of challenge. So what I would wish from the execution now is thinking about two things: finalizing the topic of licenses, and then secondly, most importantly, enforcing those rules, ensure before we start to add on top more and more regulations on there and find the conversion. I'm happy on a very high level. Let's really go on a high level. If Europe wants these full protections, Bitpanda is the first to say, let's go there. We go that extra mile. I mean, we also have a German KWG license. That's total fun, I can tell you. When you have our auditors from Bundesbank with you, you know that's a different setup. That's okay. But we need to have the price there too, and that is usually you have a license, but your market area is protected from outside people.
No, I think very, very good point. Clara, you also mentioned that when you were discussing some of the changes that MiCA brought in, but also the Liechtenstein regime brought in the game. What is your view on this complexity, but also on the actually issue of attracting the consumers to the regulated activities of the market, so that they are not then actually victims of unregulated activities somewhere else?
Well, it may sound a bit counterintuitive because usually we say regulators just get out of the way of innovation and entrepreneurs. But in highly regulated fields, like in the financial market, regulation, guardrails, and clear rules, clarity and certainty just helps innovation, as ironic as that sounds. And we see that because it helps the entrepreneurs, it gives them clarity, it gives them planning security, which they need. It helps for institutional adoption, and it helps the consumers to trust the market and to venture into that and adopt these new possibilities. However, in Europe, we set out with this great vision, and it still is. I'm still saying, yeah, we are not at the finishing line. It's not a failure. It's just the starting line, which means we have a harmonization promise on paper. Now the thing is to bring that into practice and bring that into to bring that in the operational life of the companies and also the NCAs, because this complexity and these different approaches is really hindering to make this harmonization and digital asset market promise of the EU a bit challenging. And I mean, it's a sore point for me that in Liechtenstein we don't have a MiCA licensed market player yet, but which also shows that there is such a big difference in the registration and supervision requirements before, and how MiCA has raised the bar. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, but it falls onto the NCAs on one hand to help, like in Austria, they're doing an amazing job there, and we are also working on that to bring that clarity to the market players what they have to do, because then if they have clarity on what they are expected to do, then they can also comply with these demands. The problem is if we are not giving them clear guidelines. And the other thing is, clearly, it's not just one NCA, but we have, and this is why I say, or joke with the 30 shades of MiCA, when every NCA is interpreting these rules in a different way that also hinders. This is not just introducing a healthy competition between the regulators, it's hindering the market and the market players that want to address the whole of the European Union. And then, but I think this is, we're going to in our last called the topic, how then going even beyond MiCA, how we can ensure alignment and interoperability. But this is something we need to fix first in the EU. And I'm also very curious about the Commission paper tomorrow, and the package, because this whole centralized supervision is, for us, being the EEA member, really a tricky point because of the two-pillar structure and replicated supervision institutions in the EEA. And so if there's a centralized supervision coming from the EU, that is bringing a lot of tension and problems to that. So I'm really curious what the suggested solutions and what the proposals are going to look like, and how that also then is going to work with the EEA structure and framework.
No, very good point, and I think there's a lot of people curious about the outcome of the Commission decision-making about this, but I think if I can just step into my former capacity of a member of the Parliament, I think like everybody in this room, just follow it very closely and bring all the evidence that you have from the past year or even before that, either in favor of the proposal or to modify it. But I think it will be very important. I think what we sometimes lacked in the negotiations of MiCA was not the engagement of the industry, but bringing as much as experience and evidence to the table, and I think it will be very, very necessary. But coming also back to you, Oliver, on not only on this supervisory convergence, which I think will be always a topic until we have another solution on the table, but also I mean you mentioned both with you and Philipp the sort of recognition that the MiCA brings to the industry, but also I think nevertheless there are still some problems that MiCA is not helping at this point, or may be helping, but is not that visible in practice. Companies still fighting with opening their bank accounts, issue of audits. I think AML compliance is still a big challenge. So, what is your experience actually with these very practical issues regarding the regulatory compliance?
Yeah, unfortunately, they're still there. So, especially talking about Austria as well, but I also see this in other jurisdictions. Maybe just one step back first. So, what was one of the most interesting learnings, maybe from a global perspective, coming to Europe and asking for a license? At the beginning, they were always thinking about MiCA, but as we already learned, it's not all about MiCA. We have, for all these products and services, a global platform is delivering. You need all of these licenses that Philipp elaborated before. So MiFID, e-money, if you want to issue cards, stuff like that. And then on top of that, you have DORA, which is very important. I absolutely agree, but they were not aware of that. You have tax law, you have labor law, you have hundreds of laws to be followed if you want to operate compliantly in Europe, and this was a very interesting and hard learning. And then on top of that, even if you are licensed, so we now made it, and Philipp even has 3 of them and 5 others, a lot of them, but we have the same regulator following the same rules, but our Austrian banks, for example, say, no, you will not get a bank account, never ever, which even made the FMA, so our regulator, complaining to these guys and saying, come on guys, you need to give them bank accounts, because only then we will be able to supervise also their bank accounts, because we supervise you. So same is with an auditor. Fortunately, we got a very, very good one, but it was really hard work to convince them to audit us. although it's provided by the law. So we need an auditor to comply with the law. So this is still something where also Blockchain for Europe, for example, plays a very important role. The DAA in Austria, also educating not only the consumers, the users, but also the ecosystem to now see that this is serious. This is not boys playing around with funny things in the internet and the magic internet money, but this is a serious business. We are supervisioned by the FMA and maybe soon even by ESMA. By the way, this is also something which I think is not too much helping, sorry for that, because KuCoin, myself, we were considering to have our headquarters and be licensed in Austria for reasons. So especially also because of our very knowledgeable and educated regulator. So we want to be supervised by them as well, you know. On the other hand, for sure, a European kind of single supervisory mechanism makes sense as well. So I hope they will find a kind of compromise that both is working, so that most probably we will be supervised by our regulator, but aligned somehow with ESMA at the end of the day. But this is something, if something is changing like this, so an important change like this should not come overnight and surprise the global players. Otherwise, maybe the one or the other will decide to refrain to comply with our rules in Europe.
No, very good points, and I think this very, very nicely brings us to the last area of points for discussion. I would also, because we are gradually heading closer to the end of the session, I would like to invite also the audience. If you have any questions, you can either raise your hand and do it like very old school and actually raise a question with our speakers, or use Slido to send it to me, and I'll ask the respective speaker. But I think, I mean, our panel is meant to take stock of what happened this past year. But I think to fully complete, to give a full picture, it would be actually good to use these takeaways for some future recommendations. And this is what I would like to discuss with you at the end of the session. I think all of you throughout the discussions mentioned the international context, the international dimension, what is happening in other jurisdictions. Your companies have a very good experience with being present also in other markets. So I think this is one of the issue that would be interesting to hear your views on, and also what can we do apart from tomorrow's commission paper? What can we do next in terms of either smoother application and implementation of the rules that we have, or as Vojtech mentioned, if there is a need actually to have legislative changes in the future. So I think, well, I mentioned Vojtech, so I'll give the floor to you. What is your views for the future of MiCA's implementation? We have, I think, very dynamically changing international context, a lot of things happening also across the ocean in the US. So what would be your points to sort of recommend to the policy action on both the, let's say, the policymaker side, but also the company side in the EU?
Thank you for this question. So at first, we should definitely look what's happening in other global jurisdictions. So we have to be competitive as Europe as a whole. So we have to look at first what is happening in the United States. So they have adopted the Genius Act. Now other acts concerning the crypto assets are already in discussion there. And the regulation is there quite favorable actually, concerning, for example, the stable coins. So I think that Europe should not go into other extreme, let's say. I'm not a big fan of too quick legislative or too many legislative changes. So concerning the MiCA, I would, after 1 year, rather recommend to be a bit calm on further changes, except those areas which really need change. speaking about that, there was a discussion about the supervision. So we in the Czech National Bank, we strongly support the centralization of supervision, even if in other areas we are quite reluctant. In this particular area of crypto asset services providers, we very much support the centralization because there is a lot of room for forum shopping, and we need really common interpretation of rules, so this is an area where we support not only centralization over key cusps or significant cusps, but over all cusps actually, because this is a very specific area. But otherwise, I think that we also need an alignment at the global level. So as I spoke before about the lack of a common definition of security at the European level, so actually the same problem is at the global level. So because in the US you have totally different approach to the definition of security than Europe has, and this is also something very relevant to this discussion, because even if we have a common definition at the European level, there will be still differences in the notion of what is actually crypto asset, what is actually tokenized security between Europe and the United States.
Indeed, and I think yeah, those are actually not easy tasks, but definitely worth of consideration and policy action in the future. Philipp, you mentioned a couple of times these disproportion of I would say consumer distribution across platforms that are regulated and not regulated. I think this is exactly the question of the international context. Do you have any recommendations in this regard? What can actually MiCA or other policy making can actually do in terms of maybe revert this trend or change this situation? And also, is there anything that can sort of be done on the European level actually to maybe even increase the consumer participation? We speak about a lot now about saving and investments in Europe, and I think all these initiatives. So does it sort of play together in your eyes?
Absolutely. I think first of all, we need to be sure that we are not solving yesterday's problem in 2029. Look, in 2029, there is almost not going to be so many licenses going on because either they have the license or not. And then this topic we had in the past, and where we also were unhappy about some of the licenses given out and the circumstances, that's going to be yesterday's problem. So what is the future problem in a more general scale? We now see that consumers, especially young consumers, are ready to have their crypto, investment, banking services provided by global platforms. But we have no measure to ensure that these are the licensed firms that we give out. So the one thing we need to make clear is either we create the world in Europe, which would be my preferred solution, where we have an environment that makes crypto investment banks out of Europe be successful worldwide. Let's be our firms dominate the world market. I fear that is not going to happen. But it could be a route. If that's not the route, then at least we need to protect our market and find ways to make clear that not because of reverse solicitation, the majority of markets are going to go there. And I also think that thinking this is only a CASP topic is wrong. We are already talking today about MiFID. We are talking about e-money. Do we talk about credit? Maybe. So thinking about in 2029 having ESMA taking on CASP is as measurement too late and too little. We need to do both. We need to ensure innovation. We need to make sure that all our regulation in the SAU thinks about tomorrow, about how European firms can innovate, can provide the world going forward, and provide that innovation in Europe. That's important for digital sovereignty too. And secondly, we need to make sure that from this moment on, we start to say we are not accepting global platforms without any licenses to act here and onboard clients. And look, I don't mean the one client who goes on VPN, pays about the Swift or something to find that. I spoke about these millions of clients where it's very clear. And how we're going to do that is We need, honestly, train our regulators, give them the know-how, how to work with Google and Apple Store, how to get the data. I often get back and say, we can't do that. I'm saying that's not true. And many of these regulators, I think, have never even spoken to Google and Apple. They have actually sometimes pretty strict rules about their apps and that thing. And these actually people can actually know where you are and where you're from. So they could from the day on say, no, in Austria this app doesn't work anymore. That's not even difficult, but they would need the work of a regulator. So when I think about and really coming together on a European level, then we need to have this thing solved and not how we grant licenses, because that's going to be too late in 2029.
Very good point, and I think that's sometimes the biggest challenge actually, to draft legislation that is addressing the future's needs. But Clara, your views, I mean, the international perspective and the other points that were raised.
Certainly. Well, we have been seeing the technology maturing, the markets maturing, so it's not kids running the show anymore. We see in the major and relevant jurisdictions regulation being implemented, and less regulation via enforcement or by enforcement. So this is helping to create more trust and more stability and more success in the markets. But regulation without a market is not a success. So for Europe and also we need to see how do we get the market to thrive within these framework conditions, and how and where do they need to be adjusted. Well, I think it's threefold the answer. What do we have to do now? On one hand, the national legislation, the national regulators and legislator, we need to provide further framework conditions like the civil law for tokens, especially here in Europe, to allow for tokenization to be done correctly and completely and enforceably. So this is something we need to do and look at also maybe other framework conditions that are lacking for the digital and tokenized economy to thrive. We need, as I mentioned before already, the European alignment. So that is mainly starting with the mindset. So I was very very enthusiastic about the Commissioner's speech this morning. So more of that, I think we need to have in Europe to look for like this harmonized, this harmonization promise to come live into practice for the market, and with that also to empower and support the ecosystem and the markets to thrive here in Europe, so that Europe is not becoming a digital asset flyover zone. And then lastly, of course, we need the international alignment in Europe. Not having the equivalence regime with other regimes, that was a policy choice, that is not a mistake. But nevertheless, it's still global technologies and global platforms. And not just what Philipp said, but also on a regulator level, we need to come up with solutions. Maybe if we don't have alignment on a legal level, on a regulatory level, how can we ensure alignment on an operational and technical level? So to allow for this digital asset space and these platforms to operate and across border and also across and beyond Europe, and have this done with the necessary guardrails in place to ensure consumer protection and the market players, the framework conditions for digital asset markets to thrive.
No, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think you have a very important points as well. We just got to the final minutes of the panel, so Oliver, no pressure. But what would be your recommendations? I think you mentioned also number of policy issues. You also mentioned number of practical issues linked to the application of MiCA. I think we heard a lot of angles that should be addressed in the future. So what would be your angles that you would add to the debate from your personal and your company experience?
No, maybe just in a nutshell, I think MiCA in the future is only going to be one pillar of the future of finance. We are talking future of finance here, and I was also very much excited about the speech of Commissioner Albuquerque in the morning. So crypto, I said sometimes on a panel already this year, crypto will be dead, maybe. because nobody will talk about crypto anymore in 2029. It's just about the future of finance, and stable coins will be the means of payments. We will have tokenized securities for sure, and I didn't know the situation in Czech Republic, but everywhere else in Europe, I think if something is a security by means of security, it doesn't matter the technology, it will always be a security under MiFID. So it doesn't matter. So we will have tokenized securities and real world assets. And I would even go further. You know, I for example saw in the UAE in Dubai, the VARA, the regulator over there. They brought the land register on chain, which is a super cool use case. I mean, Austria even invented the land register 200 years ago, so why not bring it on chain? Same for the IDs, for example. It would be very nice to have EIDs on blockchain, especially now with all these AI scams approaching, that something I post in social media is really coming from me only if my blockchain ID is behind it, stuff like that. So I really hope that on the one hand, Philipp's dream is coming true, and we will have a more or less protected European financial area, yeah, where the licensed players have the freedom to operate with not competing against offshore companies on the one hand side, on the other hand side, a regulation that allows us also to innovate and to work together. And there's one saying from a CEO of a global competitor. He said, it's not about the 10 or 20% of already consumers that adopted crypto, it's about the 80% we want to reach, and the market is huge enough, and what we need to do for that is, on the one hand side, educate the regulators, but on the other hand side, do really a lot of education to all the consumers, because we want our consumers to invest seriously and not just play around on a platform.
Right, I think great work actually to finalize this panel. Definitely about literacy and awareness, and I can tell you, don't stop just at the consumers level. Just go and share your awareness also with politicians, policy making, decision makers, all these environment, because it's I can tell you it's heavily needed. Thank you very much for that. I think we just got to the end of our panel. So thanks for your intervention, for your comments. Please give them a round of applause to all four of them. And I wish you a successful continuation of the conference. See you around. Thank you.